Hey guys, this is DoktorPebbles. Welcome back to the Ninja Gaiden Master Collection review, where we're taking a look at the three main 3D action games of the Ninja Gaiden franchise. This collection contains the games Ninja Gaiden Sigma, Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, and Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. We've gone through Ryu's first two outings in Sigma 1 and 2, now we'll be taking a look at the last game in this collection, Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. For transparency, a review code for this collection was provided courtesy of the publisher. Before I begin this review, here's a little backstory regarding the development of this game, as it will be important to the overall review. You see, the 3D Ninja Gaiden games were directed by Tomonobu Itagaki up until Ninja Gaiden 2, where prior to the game's release, he departed Team Ninja. Yosuke Hayashi would take up the role of director for the Ninja Gaiden franchise moving forward, starting with porting the sequel to PS3 under the title Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2. He would go on to direct the next entry in the series, Ninja Gaiden 3, and for the first time have a simultaneous release on Xbox 360 and PS3 in March of 2012. The game would later get an enhanced version released on Wii U titled Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, which was released later that year in November. That version of the game was brought to PS3 and 360 the following year and serves as the basis for Ryu's third adventure in this collection. Ryu is contacted by the Japanese government, who inform him of the ongoing terrorist attack in London where they're demanding Ryu Hayabusa. Ryu answers their call with his blade and slashes through the terrorist forces. During his siege, he encounters the Regent of the Mask, whom, after a fight, sets a curse upon Ryu's right arm known as the Grip of Murder. It imbues his arm with the pain and suffering of those he has cut down with his dragon blade, killing him on the inside. The Regent also makes a declaration to the world that it will be destroyed in the next 7 days, and Ryu journeys across the world to stop him and remove the curse. During the story, you also play as Ayame, who is also playable in the Ninja Trials and Chapter Challenge modes. Momiji also returns as a playable character in those modes, as well as Kasumi, who is now playable in the Ninja Gaiden series for the first time, after being briefly seen in a few cutscenes in Sigma 2. The combat from Sigma 2 is brought back over with additional blood and gore to complement the new steel on bone technique, which, when successfully landed, will allow you to chain execution kills on enemies. There are also more cinematic moments, and Ryu takes a more active vocal role in the story compared to previous entries. With these changes in the game's design, does Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge continue the Dragon legacy gracefully, or does it fall flat on its face in the absence of its original director? Let's take a look at what works in Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge in the good. The combat from Sigma 2 returns with all the blood and gore intact, so now you can really feel the visceral carnage as you take down enemies. It's still very satisfying to do visceral takedowns on dismembered enemies, but now with the addition of the steel on bone technique, you can chain together the takedowns for very satisfying results. I also like the new graphics engine powering this game, which shows a lot of detail on the characters' outfits and better shadows to highlight the grittiness of this game. I also like having the additional playable characters in this game that you can use in the Chapter Challenge mode, which is no longer a time-based mode, and has you level them up as you would in the normal story mode. I also like how the Ninja Trials mode really tests your knowledge on character-specific weapons and where the hell did those rockets come from? Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to dodge that on the wall? Oh my god, you didn't even tell me the button prompt for this. Oh, these enemies are fucking bull. Well, talk about going one step forward and 5 steps backwards. Let's talk about what didn't work in the third entry in the bad. The game feels completely unfair with its difficulty. But Doc, you said it was too hard in the first review, then in the last review you said it was too easy. Make up your mind on what you want this game to be. I know! Yes, I did complain about the easy nature of Sigma 2, but it was a small gripe due to the abundance of health items in the game. What's this game's solution to that? Completely removing all items from the game, including the non-health related items. Now you only have 2 methods of healing in the game. You'll recover your full health bar at save locations you're only able to save at once, and it takes longer due to the drawn out animation it plays. Outside of that, the only other way to recover lost health is by using Ninpo on enemies, but you'll only get a set amount depending on the number of enemies hit by it. This is very frustrating since there is no guarantee that the enemies you hit will recover it enough, and the Ninpo bar charges extremely slowly. To further rub salt in the wound, the game will outright refuse to heal you until all enemies in an area are killed, even when they haven't spawned or detected you yet. The lack of items also extends to the essence that you can pick up from enemies, which used to quickly charge your ultimate technique in Sigma 2, which I praised in my review. Instead of that, after fighting for a while and building up a blood combo, your character will glow red, which allows you to charge the ultimate faster and unleash it. This is far more annoying since now you must wait for the game to give it to you rather than you use essence strategically in the heat of combat. Speaking of combat, there is far less enemy variety this time around, with you just battling variations of the same 3 to 4 types of soldier enemies. There's even less variety on the enemy encounters, which usually consist of throwing 5 to 6 regular enemies at you while having 2 to 3 enemies taking pot shots off screen at you with rockets. Then rinse and repeat for 90% of this game's encounters. Occasionally, the game will throw in other enemy types such as fiends for the previous games who bear no plot relevance and feel thrown in for the sake of having enemy variety. At least it'll remind you why fighting enemies in the previous games were more fun, since they're not complete damage sponges like the ones in this game. I felt like I was slashing away at enemies for almost a minute before any limb came off of them, while previous game enemies got dismembered in mere seconds. Also doesn't help that some enemies can block every single one of your attacks and can't be guard broken, or if you must use a charge attack, one of the other enemies will immediately attack you. I just love how enemies will block my entire combo without their guard breaking, while my guard breaks after 2 hits. The combat also seems to be built around the new steel on bone mechanic since it helps take out enemies faster, but its implementation is very lackluster. You must wait for a specific enemy attack which causes them to glow dark red during the attack animation, then use your strong attack on them to initiate steel on bone. You have a small window to hit them with it, and if you get hit, you'll lose a chunk of health, so it becomes high risk with very little reward. Since the enemies you fight are damage sponges, the game really tries to push you to using this technique to win, and becomes very apparent when later in the game you fight homunculi who are extremely annoying to take out unless you land steel on bone on them. Otherwise, you'll be spending so much time trying to kill them while they wipe you out in an instant. This problem becomes much worse against the hooded alchemists who feel so unfair to fight due to how much damage they do and how they block most of your attacks or dodge them perfectly like they're ninjas or something. They also appear very early in the game, so be prepared to die often to them. I complained in previous reviews that the camera is a big problem in these games since it often hides attacking enemies off screen you can't prepare for. Somehow the devs did the unthinkable and made the camera even worse in this game with all the cramped areas you must fight these enemies in. Also due to their dark color palettes, Ryu often blends in with them in combat, making it hard to see where you are at times. The new lighting also doesn't help things since it makes some parts of the game so dark that you can't see anything even with the brightness bumped up. Another annoyance comes in the form of the grip of murder sections where you have to fight waves of enemies while your health drains and the only way to recover lost health is to kill enemies. These sections last too long and feel tacked on just to extend the runtime of the game. Speaking of extending the runtime, I think that's the only excuse I can think of as to why the devs decided to add these tedious climbing sections to the game. The controls are terrible for these sections and will often cause you to fall off due to the game's failure of detecting your inputs properly. This game also seemed to be trying to copy things from its competitors like the aforementioned climbing segments, along with walking segments, on-rail sections, cinematic moments, and of course, the QuickTime events. None of the previous Ninja Gaiden games wrestled away the controls from you for any of this stuff, so it's sad it has stooped so low in an attempt to stay relevant. Even worse is that the QuickTime events often don't show the button prompt it wants you to put in, leaving you to guess constantly and die as a result for guessing wrong. At least there's checkpoints in this game and fast reloading after dying. The relevancy doesn't end there, as the story takes itself even more seriously than the first game did. The first game at least had a bit of cheekiness to it, but Ninja Gaiden 3 takes itself far more seriously with its terrorist plots, secret conspiracies, messing with the Dragon Sword lore, and humanizing Ryu. What do I mean by that? Well, in the previous games, Ryu hardly talked and had a more reserved and mysterious composure about him. He felt like, well, a ninja. This game takes the mask off, figuratively and literally, to try to show a more human side to Ryu, and it comes off really dumb. It's especially so since Ryu already did this character arc in the first game when he got cursed. For some reason, he's now questioning himself being a ninja with the amount of dead bodies he's racked up over the course of 3 games. 4 if you also want to count Dragon Sword on the DS. Also, trying to make him a father figure to this little girl is so forced it becomes hilarious at times.
Thanks, Connor. I feel safer with this. Called me a murderer.
No.
You serious?
Otherwise, the story is extremely convoluted and filled with contrivances to force this characterization so the plot can move forward. I don't know what went through the head of whoever designed the skill tree since it's so cluttered and confusing to navigate. It also looks very ugly to look at, which even extends to the mini menu, which looks really generic compared to the previous games. Thankfully, you don't have too many weapon upgrades cluttering this menu, because there's less weapons in this game than the previous for some reason. Goodbye, giant sword and flail, I hardly knew ya. At least they made it possible to view your combo list during combat, but because it adds more clutter to your screen and may accidentally hide enemies, you're better off just looking at the long combo list in the pause menu. One last thing I want to bring up is that this game introduces some stealth mechanics in the first chapter of the game. It proceeds to not use it for the rest of the game, which makes me wonder what was even the point of including it in the first place. Now let's head back to the dojo for the opinion. Suffice to say, I did not enjoy playing Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. It felt like the game took many steps backwards in an attempt to appeal to a more mainstream audience with no understanding on what made the previous entries work. Instead, it tried to adopt some of the design gimmicks of other 7th gen console games in order to stay relevant and ended up falling flat on its face. When the combat works, it's enjoyable, but it pales in comparison to the gameplay of Ninja Gaiden 2 and feels inferior in every way. It gets worse when compared to a game like Metal Gear Rising, which ironically does many of the things that Ninja Gaiden 3 tried to do, but does it better. Maybe the Dragon Ninja will return one day to reclaim his former glory, but until then he remains in hiding. However, he cannot hide from my rating. I would give Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge this bulging vein I could not stop staring at in cutscenes out of 10. And now for my opinion on the Master Collection. The Master Collection is a bit of a mixed bag. You get 3 3D action games in the collection, though your overall enjoyment of each game will vary. Sigma will probably only appeal to those who previously played the first game, while not many players will like Razor's Edge. The second game is the most enjoyable of the collection, but if you're only interested in the second game, you might be better off buying it separately as Sigma 2 on either the consoles or PC, or pick up the original version on Xbox 360 since it's compatible with Series X. The collection also includes a digital art book and soundtrack, but you can't directly save the tracks on PC, which feels like a wasted opportunity. Also would have been nice if the collection also included the NES original games and the DS exclusive Dragon Sword, which was, contrary to my Sigma 2 review, Momiji's first playable appearance. Alas, I can't recommend the collection in full since your enjoyment will heavily depend on the amount of tolerance you have for cheap difficulty. And now it's time for my rating. I would give Ninja Gaiden Master Collection the 1983 movie Revenge of the Ninja out of 10. Thanks for watching and tune in for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, please check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.